So good morning, welcome to the lab. I'm Angelique. This yoga laboratory is going to be focused on hamstrings. Hi Swagata. So the yoga lab is, I do this every Monday and Wednesday morning at 8:30 live, and the replays are posted to my feed on Angelique Yoga on Facebook and the Ashtanga Yoga Shala West Palm Beach WPB Facebook page. And if I can get a good save of the video, it's also going to be on my YouTube at Angelique Sandus. So you can go back and reference this at any time, or if you can't sit and watch the whole thing, you can watch it later. So hamstrings, yeah. The method that I teach is Ashtanga Yoga, and hamstring issues are very common in the Ashtanga Yoga practice. So why, right? This is one of sort of, how do I say this diplomatically? It's one of the primary complaints of the Ashtanga Yoga practice that it injures your hamstrings. Yes, I used finger quotes. That it injures your hamstrings. Knees is another one that is attributed to the Ashtanga Yoga practice, and we're going to talk about knees on Wednesday. For today, hamstrings. So why is that? Why does Ashtanga Yoga in particular get into hamstrings? So this is mostly my opinion and my theorizing, right? But first of all, the Ashtanga Yoga method is a system. It differs from vinyasa classes and vinyasa practices in that it is the same sequence done over and over every day, and it's a progressive sequence. There's 6 series of Ashtanga Yoga, so you progressively work into more complex, more challenging postures. But as a system, it is organized in such a way that everything that you start with leads you into these deeper and more complex experiences. So the choices that are made in the very beginning of the practice are made for a reason. They're made so that you set up body patterning, that you prepare your body for those postures later. There are many... Yeah, babe.
Can I play baseball?
No, not while I'm doing yoga.
Okay, play baseball.
Not while Kaz... Honey, just go out. You finished with your... I'm sorry. It's school time. You finished with your first lesson? Why don't you get on and do Success Maker for a half hour then? If you get it done now, you can finish quicker. Or just to keep yourself occupied and don't bother Galen because he's on classroom. Okay. Mom life. So, where was I? Oh, the Ashtanga system is very scientific, and it's set up so that those beginning postures, those beginning choices are preparing your body in neuromuscular patterning, in strength, and in flexibility for those more intense postures that come later. Those intense postures that come later may never show up in any vinyasa class. So the choices are not as essential in that system. Does that make sense? Like putting your hands together, or like taking the 2 fingers around the big toes. Some of these detailed choices, like putting the arm behind the leg in side angle instead of in front of the leg. All of these choices are made around a system that supports what comes later. So that being said, a lot of what comes later requires very open hamstrings. And the primary series of Ashtanga Yoga gets into the hamstrings. It is all these forwards folds. Forward fold, forward fold, forward fold, one right after another. There's other benefits and reasons to doing forward folds, so many in the primary series, but the one that we're going to be talking about today is the hamstrings. And why are we giving so much attention to the hamstrings? Number one, because we want them open for later postures. And number 2, I think it has a lot to do, and this is also feeds into why there's so many hamstring injuries in the Ashtanga practice. Because our culture, particularly in the West, sets our bodies up for tight hamstrings. We do a lot of sitting on chairs. I happen to have a chair. We do a lot of sitting on chairs where this attachment of the hamstring is short and this attachment of the hamstring is long. This is a pattern of posturing that our bodies in the West have. We stopped sitting on the floor somewhere around first grade, second grade, and start sitting on chairs. And even if we're not having our feet on the floor, maybe we're tucked up, right? And all of this knee attachment of the hamstring is shortening while the hip attachment of the hamstring is lengthening. This is going to create an imbalance through that muscle group. So let me get into the anatomy here. So hamstrings, it's a group of muscles in the back of the leg that attach over the hip joint that connects to the sit bones of the pelvis, pass over the hip joint along the back of the leg, and then attach below the knee. So it crosses these two joints, the hip at the top and the knee at the bottom. And the attachments are all at the top, they're all at the sit bone. On the bottom, they attach at different points in the knee. Two of them attach in the inner knee and one along the outer knee, right? So the main issue that comes up is at that sit bone attachment. I've been through it almost, I want to say probably, a huge percentage of students that I've been teaching for 16 years now, and yeah, probably 70% of students at some point or another experience a process of figuring out how to open the hamstring and strengthen and stabilize the hamstring, particularly at the sit bone attachment. So it's a common thing. So this is, okay, hamstrings, sit bone, this is looking at the back, sit bone, there's one muscle that comes around, another that comes around inside, and then the inner thigh that comes around there. They're all three attached up here at the sit bone, this big one outside, and two of them along the inner knee. See the three? Yeah? So, because of this patterning that I was talking about, this sitting pattern that we have, that upper attachment by the sit bone tends to be stretched and weak, right? And the attachment by the knee tends to be tight. And tight sometimes means strong, right? Not always, but sometimes. So also our physical activities, particularly runners and bikers, tend to have tight hamstrings. Because of the patterned movement and strength, the leg never fully extends, right? When you're bike riding, I'm miming here now. So when you're bike riding, right, you're pushing, and then with a bent leg, pulling up and pushing down and pulling up, and it never gets to that extension where the top of the hamstring is working and the bottom of the hamstring is extended, lengthened, right? Even when you're running, that back sort of position never fully stretches out into full extension. So there tends to be, right, there's that kick up moment and pull in. So there's never a moment in those sorts of movements that give full extension from the hip engagement, pulling the leg behind the body, and full length through the back of the knee, which is a certain relationship between the quadriceps, which are the muscles in the front of the leg, and that's what straightens the knee, and the hamstrings on the back of the leg that extends the hip, pulls the leg behind the body. So this is a pattern that's unfamiliar in most of our bodies, even non-runners and non-bikers. We have very few activities. If anyone can think of them, dancers will experience that full extension and that strength in the hamstring attachment at the sit bone. But gymnasts, dancers, I can't think of any other activity that will give you a balance there. So the primary series of Ashtanga Yoga starts to address that. Now, it's not a perfect system. So the thing that I've experienced is that first, the primary series aims to give you, and this is actually pretty typical of the Ashtanga system. It wants you to find length and openness before finding strength. Strength tends to tighten, right? So generally the Ashtanga system wants you to find openness and then strength. But within that, there are subtleties of work that need to be done to establish stability while you open. And this is where the issue comes in with that hamstring attachment. All of these forward folds that ask you to have completely straight legs are aiming to stretch the hamstring all the way from one end to the other, and to use the front of the leg, the quadricep, in relationship with that, right? The quadricep is engaged to keep the leg straight while you're stretching through the back of the leg, the hamstring. If the knee bends at all, even the tiniest bit, you are reinforcing the pattern of a shortened attachment at the knee and a lengthened attachment at the hip, right? So in a forward fold, right, if the hamstrings are feeling tight, the knees bend. This is how we often approach and ease into our hamstrings. But now again, this attachment is lengthened, this attachment is shortened. So there's going to be an imbalance there. Tight hamstrings will also affect the low back, right? If you try to force yourself into straight legs and try to force yourself into a forward fold, the back is going to compensate by flexing forward to get you in. So when this reaches its limit of stretch, this tries to compensate and take you further. So if you are having any back pains in your forward folds, you should bend the knee, right? Because that means that there's an issue at the hip joint and the back is taking over. So bending the knee allows the hip part of the hamstring to find some release as you work towards fully straightening the leg and avoiding letting the back compensate. So that might mean you don't go as deep into the forward fold as you focus on straight legs. Your body's not going to get as close to the legs, and that's fine. Remember that the practice is not about the picture, it's about the function of the body. So how close your face is to your knees is not the point. It's how much freedom you're getting through the stretch that's being asked of you, how much stability you're getting to support that stretch, right? And in strength poses, how much strength you're getting to accomplish the posture as well. So, what establishes stability during those stretches? In the Ashtanga system, we talk about bandhas. Bandhas are an energetic concept within the body that support the movement of pranic energy. If you want to know more about bandhas, I do have 2 videos posted earlier in the feed that get into Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. These are from last week, so feel free to go check those out after you watch this. But the bandhas are activated by a physical sort of trigger. Mula Bandha is activated by the pelvic floor, which is a pelvic stabilizer. It stabilizes the pelvis. And Uddiyana Bandha is activated through the transverse abdominals and iliopsoas. And this, for me, this combination of stabilizing the pelvis and drawing the muscles of the low belly in support the work of stretching the hamstring attachment at the sit bone, right? This is your stabilizing element so that you can find a balance of stretch through that hamstring attachment all the way through the knee attachment of these long hamstring muscles. The bandhas also help to, okay, this is where it gets really intricate. The bandhas also help to activate muscular engagement of the hamstring at the attachment while you're stretching it into the forward fold, right? Muscle groups all want to work together. So engagement of the attachment of the hamstring as you're stretching it will strengthen the attachment at the sit bone so that you don't overstretch in this already stretched and weak place when you're trying to stretch the whole muscle. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm not using my mat at all. So in this position, we were talking about how this is a cultural pattern. Now this attachment is stretched and this attachment is shortened, right? This is what our hamstring is used to. So when we start to stretch here and it is resisting, this will try to compensate because it already understands stretch. It understands that from this cultural position that we've already established through our lifetime, right? So as we start to stretch this end of the hamstring, it's going to keep pulling through this end, right? It's going to pull where there's pull available. So while we stretch this end, we want to strengthen this end to stabilize that so that the stretch happens where we want it to, along the belly of the muscle and towards the knee attachment to sort of let this part catch up to this part. So how do you do that? Let's talk about Prasarita Padottanasana, which is where it often comes up. Yeah? Because again, this position is not culturally common for our sort of pedestrian body movements. We don't often sit on a chair with our legs way out here. So that inner hamstring, remember how I said that there's that one little muscle that's more inside and then they sort of fan out around? That's usually the one that we end up dealing with. So in this wide position, it's getting a lot of attention. And we protect the attachment by finding Mula Bandha, which is the pelvic floor, which pulls the bones of the pelvis towards each other, at least like energetically does. Maybe not physically, right? But it pulls the tailbone and pubic bone towards each other and pulls the sit bones towards each other. So it connects everything from underneath. Then Uddiyana, the transverse abdominals, draw in and back toward the low back into the pelvis to support this area from the inside or from the front body, so that you don't move into your forward folds by lifting at that attachment, right? Do you see how this pattern, this like diving pattern, I get my arms out of the way, accesses this right away. And then this is already overstretched and you just keep pulling on it, right? And then eventually it reaches down the muscle. I want to find more balance with that. So instead of the dive that starts with a hip hinge and flies the sit bones up, already overstretching the hamstring, we want to fold in over Uddiyana Bandha, over our low belly. So we draw up, we engage the quadriceps to stabilize through the knee, and we fold over this space, right? Keeping the sit bones sort of drawn toward the heels, yeah, as long as we can. Now that doesn't mean that when we reach our max stretch, we keep going here, because that's going to go into the back. It just means that we soften over. I'm not hugging and squeezing over that space. I'm softening over that space so that this stays engaged and holding as I stretch through the muscle. So if this is engaged and holding, the stretch is going to start to access lower through that muscle group, right? So this keeps lifting Mula Bandha and an engagement at the top of the hamstrings as I stretch it. And you only go as far as you can. You only go as far as you can where you don't feel strain or pull or certainly not pain at that connection. Now, you're going to feel stretch, right? And at first, definitely we identify the sensation of stretch, that sort of burny feeling, with pain. So tune in, check in, be discriminate about the sensations that your body is giving you. That's just feedback, it's communication, right? You want to feel stretch, but you don't want to feel that strain, the pull and the strain and the pain at the attachment sites. You want to feel it through the belly of the muscle. Okay, let me see if there's anything I need to clarify. Let me just review what I've gone over. So the hamstring attachments go through the hip and the knee. Our sort of patterning in the way that we live in our lives, we tend to sit in a way that is lengthening the hip attachment and shortening the knee attachment. And all of these forward folds, particularly in the primary series, but any yoga practice that deals with a lot of forward folds, starts to address this imbalance in the hamstrings. And the key is to find more stretch at the knee attachment and more stability and strength, stability at the hip attachment. To do that, we want to make sure that we use bandhas as a support of stability, and we are aware of keeping a certain engagement, keeping the sit bone drawn in as we fold forward, so the stretch can happen through the whole muscle and not just at that point, right? So even in sun salutations, avoid the dive. See how I'm hinging right away, I'm shortening my back, and it's all happening at the sit bone, right? We want to fold over the belly so that there's a certain holding happening there, and then you can lengthen all the way through. Now avoid reaching the max hamstring and hugging in, because that can strain the back. If you do reach your max stretch, the back is going to try to overdo it by flexing in. Intermediate series, second series of Ashtanga Yoga, starts to address this strength through the hamstring, the upper hamstring attachment, the whole hamstring really, in the back bend work, right? Hamstring strength becomes especially that hip attachment, becomes very important in supporting the work of back bends. It helps to open the hip flexors that are a piece of the arc in our back bend work. And all of the back bends on the belly, Shalabhasana. Now, if you're not doing Ashtanga, you've definitely experienced Shalabhasana, I'm sure, Dhanurasana, in your vinyasa practice, right? This lift through the legs, this is a hamstring attachment strengthener, right? But we want to keep the legs straight, using the quadriceps to support the work of engaging through the hamstring attachment at the hip. If we bend our knees, this gets to let go and again strengthens down there at the other end of the attachment and further supports that imbalance. Oh, there's so much information, you guys. I try to make these little mini workshops quick and to the point, but there's so much information. This is just a start. I hope that what you've gotten in this video is at least enough information to start to explore within your body how you're accessing your hamstrings. Are you further encouraging that imbalance that I talked about from the hip to the knee by always bending the knee in your hamstring stretch? Even a little bend is going to shift the work up to the hip and take it out of the knee. When you do start to work on full extension through the knee, be aware of hyperextension, because hyperextension can overstretch the knee attachment. See, there's so much. But this can be really, really tricky to explore. Those of you that are dealing with hyperextension, start with a bent knee and engage the quadricep to the point that you find that shaky place. I have hyperextension. See how much my knee sort of pops back? Yeah, can you see that? So this overextended knee can weaken that attachment as well. So you want to start with the bent leg and engage and stretch and straighten, and you'll find that there's this wobbly place where like it either wants to bend or it wants to pop back. And you just hold that. And it's going to be shaky and wobbly for a while, like 2 years. But eventually you find how to stabilize with full extension without popping into hyperextension. Okay. Yeah, mainly I want you to have some information to explore how you're using your hamstring in your own practice. Explore the idea of stretching from one end to the other. Where do you have weaknesses? Where do you have tightnesses? Where is there an imbalance for you? Is it going into your back? right? If it's going into your back, you're overdoing it. Hang back a bit, soften through the abdomen muscles so that you can find the action happening, the stretch happening at the back of the leg, and then hang there. Don't go further. There's no need to get your face to your knees. The point of a forward fold is not touch your face to your legs. The point of a forward fold is to lengthen the energy through the back body, lengthen the muscles of the back body. So if you're getting length, you're doing it, right? That's success. That's the point. If anyone does have pain at the sit point, and it's intense, and it's not workable, bend the knees. Bending the knees is a way to protect yourself from overdoing it, right? So I don't recommend avoiding forward folds at all, but bend the knees to protect that until it's at a point, feedback-wise, sensation-wise, mobility-wise, that you can start to address it with a straight leg, and then don't go so far. Yeah? If anyone has any questions about this or is dealing with sit bone stuff and they want to get more specific information, feel free to message me, leave a comment, whatever you want to do. I'm happy to help you through this. I've been through the hamstring stuff. I've been exploring it. The information that I have is really primarily based on experience within my own body and my own practice and the students I've worked with. I have a baseline of anatomy understanding, which I think is important for all yoga teachers, but I'm not like an anatomist. Like, I don't have my PhD or anything, so I can only share what I know and what I understand. So work with your own body. Explore these ideas within your own body. Go slowly, find your breath, and see what comes up for you, right? Take in the feedback that your body is giving you and explore. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for hamstrings. Wednesday, we're going to be looking at knees. So this is the week of the common injury complaints in the Ashtanga yoga practice, hamstrings and knees. Let me know if you have any thoughts or if you are experiencing anything and I can give you further insight. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you Wednesday. Remember, these classes are donation-based. So if you're able and willing, you can donate through Venmo, Angelique Sandus 0646, or Zelle, Angelique_yoga@yahoo.com. But even if you don't, please take benefit from this stuff. I just want to be a support for your practice while we're all doing this alone at home in our living rooms and bedrooms and kitchens or where we have the space. So let's just maintain community, and I'm here for you. Be well, take care of yourselves, take care of each other.